Hello, I'm Nick Dykstra, and the following is an evaluation of the environmental impact of golf and what should be done. As global environmental stress continues to build, international leaders have begun to act as recent policy shifts, such as the Paris Agreement, have been made to combat the adversity of pollution, food and water shortages, climate change, and social injustice. However, despite the positive actions taken toward solving these environmental shortcomings, there are still concerns over the impact of the game of golf as it relates to these issues, as golf plays a significant role in the efficiency of how these matters are addressed on a global scale. And while the sport may hold a reputation as a leisure recreation conducted in natural environments, evidence indicates that golf is played in environments which are often far from being natural, while significantly altering ecosystems and influencing social environments. And while at the surface the game of golf may not seem like an urgent global environmental issue, the impact from the game is being increasingly felt at a global level as the game has branched out from its Western European origin to a multi-billion-dollar industry. In fact, golf has spread across the world with such great speed as the footprint of the game can now be found in over 34,000 golf courses in more than 175 countries and on every continent. With the breadth of the sport being so vast, it has become time to address A. The alteration of ecosystems and landscapes, B. Water and chemical usage, C. Cropland displacement and invasive species, and D. Social impacts of the sport. Additionally, by providing a balanced view of how the aforementioned elements relate to established policies, alternative actions, or conclusions as to what can or should be done to improve the footprint of the game as it impacts our environment will be brought to light. The following slide then displays how the game of golf has spread around the globe, as there are thousands of courses in a number of countries, including the US, Canada, and of course the UK. Moving then to why action should be taken. With the rapid expansion of golf courses in the United States alone, as course numbers have grown from only 267 in 1910 to over 15,000 communities today, the sport has caused drastic changes to the large areas of land which they are constructed, as well as the proximate ecosystems around them. Additionally, the effect is then amplified by the many businesses and houses which flood onto the properties surrounding the courses for the purpose of profiting from the adjacency to the recreational area. But these sporting fields do not just impact those who live in the immediate vicinity of the courses, with high real estate prices and increased chemical repercussions. These courses are also capable of burdening those living in outlying communities, as regions like those near Lake Mead have seen golf courses accounting for 28 of the top 100 users of water from the shrinking lake in a recent usage survey. However, when water levels dwindle in the areas around courses, like they have in the Cochlear Valley area of California in recent years, the water supplies have not been cut off to those courses in the community, despite the concern over drinking water availability. This prioritization of what is viewed as a hobby for rich men then develops into resentment by those who are not affiliated with the courses, as the usage of the finite resource drives a wedge between the social fabric of our society. However, there are ways in which many of these communities have decided to deal with the problem of satisfying the wishes of both those who view the courses as vital habitats for vegetation and those who value the recreational activity. One of these methods, in which about 12% of U.S. courses use, has been a movement toward irrigating with recycled waters. By then using these gray water supplies, many consider the result to be a win-win, as the golf courses can utilize the water to effectively irrigate turf grasses, and the local communities benefit from the sale of recycled water, which they can then use to further fund water quality improvement projects. Unfortunately, while the utilization of gray water supplies for irrigation of these properties is a method which has potential to greatly reduce the environmental stress on many ecosystems, there are still a few known drawbacks, as gray waters often contain higher saline levels due to water softening methods in residential settings. The buildup of saline levels in the soil can then lead to further problems with more delicate ornamental plants that are often found in these grounds, as the high salt concentration levels can stress or even kill these plants. Additionally, the drawbacks toward the gray water utilization approach is also hindered in that many communities do not have the capability to provide recycled water for irrigation usage, as they are lacking the proper infrastructure to deliver the water to the courses. But as we continue to encounter a growing demand for the golf industry, a possible governmental policy update to the existing Paris Agreement might benefit society by calling for any newly developed course to be required to implement access to recycled water supplies. In reference then to the chart shown here, it is clear to see that hundreds of local golf communities could be improved by making relatively simple policy changes. Additionally, by creating policies and/or incentives for golf communities to update their infrastructure to include something as simple as recycled water supply lines to their courses, regional water supplies would be likely to produce a reduced strain on a limited capacity for public drinking water demand. But the high rate of water usage in areas which have seen shrinking water supplies is only the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, with further environmental problems surrounding the sport. However, by further developing potential solutions like the gray water supplies and creating policies to enforce guidelines, golf has the capability to play a significant role in reducing stress on our physical and social environments while also providing us with a healthful form of entertainment. Looking then at what further policy options can be revised. While the introductory proposed policy example could be considered as an honorable attempt at improving the global environment, the fact remains that there are costs and sacrifices involved in carrying out these types of drastic changes. Specifically, the stress created by increased sodium and nitrate levels in the gray water are of top concern in the opening example, as these ingredients are capable of contaminating healthy soils. However, the one area which we often feel the most resistance from and concern to environmental justice is the money element. With it, the concerns often relate around an idea that changing from currently developed or popularized methods will cause us more in the immediate future, as new technology can't always be trusted, and people feel that some individuals will suffer as a result. Additionally, public sentiment often holds to prioritizing today's economic holdings over our future sustainability. And while neither perspective is necessarily completely wrong or completely correct, there needs to be a greater attention given to finding and improving a middle ground that constantly aims to improve the lives of those who are in our global environment. And then working toward this improved state, the game of golf looks to be poised for a position where it is able to embody the spirit of a revolutionary change toward prosperous environments. But to accomplish this goal, governments will need to make a stand against environmental problems with forceful environmental policies, which will likely contend with immediate financial obligations. Along with these stronger policies, administrative processes will also need to be streamlined in order to prevent barriers within the business of golf. To accomplish this, certain flexibilities will also need to be taken under consideration, as a one-size-fits-all approach to solving our environmental deficiencies is sure to be an inefficient method for innovation across such diverse climates. In developing innovation tied to both golf and global environmental stress factors, world policymakers would be wise to consider the following policy propositions. The first of these relates to the method in which golf physically impacts the global environment. as golf facilities have been shown to leave significant repercussions within regions. This impact is commonly initiated as construction projects heavily alter the natural landscapes and are applied to enormous plots of land. The greatest example of the enormity of these landscapes has taken shape near Shenzhen, China, where the Mission Hills Golf Resort broke into the Guinness Book of World Records by becoming the largest golf resort in the world in 2004. The enormous resort features 11 championship-sized courses, multiple driving ranges, an 18-hole par 3 course, spas, tennis courts, shopping, offices, a hotel, homes, and apartments, which are scattered across nearly 5,000 square acres of altered lands. And while not all courses are created at such a great magnitude, the sheer number of courses popping up around the globe is equally impressive and impactful. In the United States alone, recent reports have indicated that nearly 3 million acres of golf-related properties exist, where course designers, local residents, and groundskeepers work throughout the year to transform these environments. One such example of these recently developed golf courses took root in my hometown of Sioux Center, Iowa, where the community elected to construct a 205-acre golf course where thousands of man-hours worth of excavation work was needed to obtain the desired man-made lakes and rolling terrain which the local golfers desired. Upon completion of the groundswork, these changes then spurred further alterations to the local habitat as residential subdivisions and businesses inundated the property encompassing the course, so that they might profit from holding proximate benefits from the built-up terrain. However, while these developments do change soil formations and eradicate some natural plant life, not each of these golf courses should necessarily be considered irresponsible in how they address environmental balance. In fact, recent developments have shown that when combined with the usage of gray waters, golf courses can reduce the impact of wastewaters which would normally be dumped straight back into rivers and lakes. This is then achieved by the modern courses which utilize grasses and various organic materials which allow discharge waters to break down naturally before being released to other communities downstream. Ideally then, an amendment to the existing clean water policies could take aim at the utilization of gray waters to optimize the usage of drinking water and would also be geared toward utilizing these trickle-down water retention ponds, which use gravity flow and organic filters to reduce the harm created by urban centers. And while the initial costs of routing piping of gray waters to the golf course sprinkler systems and retention ponds would surely pose an upfront financial hit, the long-term financial savings would certainly be offset as American golf communities more efficiently adhere to the requirements of the Clean Water Act, which deems it unlawful to discharge any pollutant from a point source into navigational waters. The next problem is then closely related to the previous condition, as the destruction of native land formations not only impacts environmental balances but also leads to the development of altered plant life in the areas around the grounds. One notable example of this dilemma being recently enacted on the southern coast of Turkey, on the coastal borders of the Antalya province. As this project got underway, the primary interest in the region revolved around financial interests, as the area around the city of Antalya became known as a popular tourist destination. With this budding popularity, land developers then decided to attract further profits by replacing several hundreds of acres of developed coastal pine tree forests and fertile crop growing fields with large grass lawns that attract golf tourism. However, disregard for the delicate balance of plant life and developed woodlands grew so prominent that eventually more than 90% of all of the courses in Turkey were said to be situated in this seaside location. The implementation of these tourism sites then further affected the local flora, as property developments naturally flooded into the region as well. With these compounded developments, which lack an eye for the preservation of balanced habitats, the local Gulf tourism market then changed this region by eliminating much of the locally grown food supply and drowning out most of the animal life which had previously called this area home. In then developing a solution to overcome these habitat stripping faux pas in the future, coordinated planning mechanisms will need to be implemented so as to avoid environmental blows caused by economic prioritization. And while the Turkish political officials later took action by developing the planning law, the law of coastal areas, the law of the forest, and the law of the environment to combat these issues, irreparable damage had already been caused to the Mediterranean coastlines of their country. However, while Turkey may have acted too late to prevent lasting damage, newer global policies like the Paris Agreement would be wise to learn from these prior mistakes in order to more efficiently work toward the agreement's goal of halting global warming trends. Specifically, by implementing these features of the planning law, Paris Agreement participants could ensure that their countries form land developments in compliance with hygiene, science, and regional environmental conditions. Next, and similarly related to the disposition of natural habitats, is the problem of animal and plant life displacement. And while you would most likely expect to receive only reports on how much of damage golf courses inflict on this matter, there are a few studies which have determined that golf courses can provide advantageous habitats for animal life such as butterflies, birds, reptiles, salamanders, and a variety of small mammals. However, these pervading species, while part of the environmental solution, can also aid in being part of the problem when not managed properly. This is because when new species are introduced in areas where they have no natural predator or physical environmental condition which limits their dissemination, they can consequently choke out other life forms. This occurs because each species holds a unique set of needs, and in circumstances where one plant or animal thrives, there will inversely always be another species which will deteriorate as a result. A plant life example of this can be seen through the example of the kikuyu grass, which was brought over to courses in Southern California because of its reputation as a drought-resistant plant. The grass was then able to thrive in some of the premier golf clubs in the region, such as Torrey Pines, as it was capable of producing the desired green look even during terms of water shortages or drought. However, the grass became so uncontrollable in certain areas that it choked out and poisoned native species to the area. To then combat these scenarios where invasive species take root in an uncontested area, the United States Department of Agriculture placed a policy into effect in 2008 as an amendment of that year's Farm Bill, which was labeled as the Lacey Act. The principle behind the Lacey Act then claimed that it would become unlawful to import certain plants and plant products without an import declaration. And once again, this policy would be much better suited if it became a global policy through an environmentally themed policy rather than to merely exist as a national declaration. And one more problematic aspect to the sport is a link to the harmful societal elements of the game which create deep scars in our society's social environment. This harm is drawn from the fact that the game carries a strong reputation for pandering to the stereotypically social elite, due to the fact that women and African Americans had been prohibited from playing some of the top-ranked courses until just the last couple of decades. Also leading to the divide that golf creates between members of our society is the price of all things surrounding the sport, as the average cost for golf clubs totals several $100s, and the average price for the round of golf in the United States tallies nearly $40 per 18 holes. Additionally, public perception of golf courses also paints a picture of green grasses and giant houses where water seems to be applied to the grounds no matter if the region is in drought conditions or not. This divide also extends to the property around the courses too, as Gulf-front homes often seem to be reserved for a wealthier degree of resident. Researchers correspondingly support this claim, as some data reports the price premium put on these Gulf-linked properties to be 8% higher than similar property in a non-golf course linked zone. Additionally, developers of golf course subdivisions have been known to further reject environmental health in these communities, as they ban the installation of solar panels for cosmetic purposes. An example of this attitude can be found in the Trails of Glenwood subdivision of Plano, Texas, which is located directly between the courses at Waters Creek and Club at Los Rios complexes, where this ban was carried out by developers of the golf community who had rejected the use of solar devices for aesthetic reasons. And at first thought, while this rejection of environmental conservation may seem to reflect poorly on golf communities, it could also be thought of in a positive light, as the aesthetic rejection of these individuals led to greater innovation by companies like Solar City, who has worked to develop solar shingles which hide the undesired visibility of solar cells. In working toward solutions for these social environmental toxins, prestigious golf communities have already made great strides, as notable men's clubs like Augusta National have in recent years changed their policies to grant African American and women golfers to play on their grounds. However, to further improve global social movements, global leaders would be wise to not only more closely adhere to the existing United Nations Declaration on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, which states that violations of human rights tend to jeopardize friendly relations among peoples, cooperation between nations, and international peace and security, but to also require that entities like Gulf organizations must acknowledge the rules or form similar level of global ethical policy. Additionally, one way in which course developers could work toward reversing the negative elitist image, which is also or often tied to the sport, would be by implementing policies to utilize the inflated costs of the surrounding properties by making solar usage mandatory for adjacent properties. What is next then? With rising concern for the stress placed on our global environment, along with the rising number of golf courses in our global communities, quick and calculated decisions must be made to ensure that our global communities can sustain life in our evolving habitats. Although reform has worked to a certain degree in some areas of environmental protection, as it relates to the evolution of golf, streamlining policies and coordinating consistent regulation between global communities will benefit our societies by providing an improved quality of life. And while many of these listed solutions present an increased monetary burden or a revision to existing methods, the individual strain can be minimal if global communities work together to mitigate these environmental stressors. Thank you.